section, I believe.
So thank you everyone for joining us. This is our fourth session this week for our coach socialization. And today we have a new topic specifically about nutrition and how athletes can get nutrition during this time of isolation. So we actually have two dietitians and two dietitian interns from Canadian Sports Center Atlantic joining us today. So Morgan will be running through the presentation, but then Angela, Melissa, and Erin will be jumping in as well with some information. So again, if you have any questions, just write them in the chat box, and then towards the end we'll open it up for a Q&A. So without further ado, Morgan, take us away.
Thank you, Christy, for the introduction. So I'm Morgan King. I'm Angela's intern at the moment for the Sports Center. And we're going to talk today a bit about athletes in isolation. I'm first going to start with a preface, though. There's actually no specific food, diet, specific nutrients that are actually going to prevent you from getting COVID. And this is actually quite important actually to state at the beginning of this. But nevertheless, we've been actually getting quite a few questions from our own athletes. I guess I was planning on doing a little bit of a chat to start off with a little bit of a discussion. I don't know if you want to open up the floor, Christy, for just a little bit of input from the coaches and seeing what are some of the athletes asking them, or how has the isolation affected their athletes' nutrition?
Yeah, sure. So I'll unmute everyone. So just know that you are all unmuted unless you muted yourselves.
Cool.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to get like a picture up. My name's Simon. I'm on my mom's laptop. I'm tuning in from I'm a rugby player. I play for Curtis Lozon. So that's why I'm listening in.
So I guess some of the information we're looking is seeing like some like accessibility to food. So like, is getting groceries difficult at the moment for athletes? Or kind of other areas like being able to prepare foods, kind of areas like that, and seeing how kind of the isolation and quarantine affected.
For me, it hasn't affected me too much because my parents are pretty much taking care of that. They're feeding me pretty well. We're loaded up on food, so I don't need to worry too much about that. But as for other people, I've heard of some of my friends who I play rugby with complaining about, not having as much food as they did before and stuff. So it definitely is affecting, athletes.
More on the side of like accessibility and being able to get stuff.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of people currently, especially in grocery stores, a lot of hoarding. So there are certain foods that are kind of out for some athletes that we're finding, but
Yeah.
we came up with a couple of tools, which I'll get into a bit later, which Melissa and Erin and Angela and I have done. Floor still open for anybody else. Hi, Angela.
Hi, sorry I joined a little late. I was just getting off another call. So thanks to Morgan for starting it off. Just to kind of preface there, I had a few athletes that just returned last week from out of country, and they are in self-isolation, now mandatory isolation. And some of them are para-athletes. So I'm just kind of curious to see any coaches on the call, if they have any para-athletes, because it kind of was a little bit of an eye-opener for me, because this particular athlete doesn't even have a balcony, can't even get outside, has some other mental health issues that he was sort of worried about in terms of not being able to train, because that is his outlet. So and then again, the other side of that was nutrition, and he's very dialed into his nutrition. So not being able to find, brand X of particular food item, having someone getting that for him and then being able to be okay with that. So it just kind of put a different, and prepare food as well. So put a different spin in terms of athlete A versus athlete B being in isolation, and sort of the multiple kind of factors that can kind of play on an athlete. So we wanted to sort of hear what were some of the challenges that you're hearing out in the field, and if it's similar to what we're hearing. But from what we have heard, we thought putting something together that might help them ease their overall fears in terms of nutrient intake. And in fact, this one athlete was just more concerned with what should I be eating, because I will be in isolation. Are there any particular foods that might help prevent? So I think that was kind of the first kind of myth busting that we had to kind of put out there, that and I know Morgan will get to in the next couple of slides, but yeah, to put that to bed, and then augment sort of their current dietary habits or nutrition that might help them just overall in terms of general health. So kind of two different things, but I'll let you continue, Morgan.
Sure. So it seems that most people have been hearing the same stuff. So we came and pulled together a couple of the things that Angela and Erin and I and Melissa have been hearing from our athletes. So one of the key points that we kind of pulled together that we thought were important for some of the athletes to keep in mind, for number one, basically keep to a regular eating schedule. Mostly because our bodies heavily rely on certain time of day. So our bodies are usually fairly good at indicating when you're hungry, like your mood will change, your stomach will growl. So keeping to those kind of regular schedule actually will help, and also will help with reducing the amount of snacking or boredom eating that you're having. The other second piece that we thought was important is actually keeping up fiber. Fiber is always great for overall health and well-being, and dietitians are always promoting our fiber. It's good for digestive health, and also it's good for your bacterial and your gut health, and also for your digestive system. Not only that, but fiber is actually a very satiating, so it actually suppresses the feeling of hunger, and actually will keep you from snacking and actually make you feel full longer, which I think is very important. Not only that, with fiber, hydration is also extremely important when it comes to fiber intake. So when you're actually increasing your fiber for your gut health, it's actually important to increase your hydration. Otherwise, your regulatory things the fiber is supposed to be benefit you will actually hinder. Not only that, but hydration is important to reduce dehydration. If you're actually starting to become more dehydrated, it actually can increase stress. And at the moment, we actually want to reduce stress at the moment, mostly with all this COVID and isolation. We're already quite stressed at the moment. So anything that can actually reduce a little bit of the stress and stress hormones will help. And these are like fluids that you can have, like your water, your herbal teas, or soups. And at the moment, we've been actually recommending for athletes to have about 2 to 4 liters. But again, this is quite variable depending on the individual needs of the athlete, depending on how much they're working out, their sweat rates. It's just a general guideline to actually just keep up on top of your hydration. And for our fourth part that we thought was important was keeping a balanced meal. So it's actually quite important. Nutrition's still important. Not forgetting to eat, again, like eating at those times, overall well-being. So again, balanced meals for performance and also for health should be continued. And also, not only that, some of the plates or well balanced will be adjusted, and I actually will go into a little bit more detail about the athlete plates and how they kind of adjust depending on the training schedule. Sorry, I'm a bit parched myself. For the fifth section that we thought was important for the athletes is actually keeping protein high. So since athletes will actually have a reduced amount of training, we actually want to maintain and preserve muscle mass for the athletes. So this would be focusing on your lean proteins. So your high quality proteins of meats, fish, chicken, soy, or dairy products for your athletes. And actually the intake should be a little bit higher than usual just to, again, preserve that muscle mass. Not only that, we've been getting some questions around supplements and if they should continue to take supplements. Yes, of course, it'd be very important for these athletes to continue, especially if you have clinical deficiencies or other areas in which that you actually need to support. So if your athletes are actually taking supplements, we would advise to continue taking that supplement protocol.
I had a question. So with this sort of meal plan, do you think like we have to adjust how we're eating now versus how we were eating before because of like my activity level has gone way down, right? Yeah. So how would I sort of adjust that? I'm trying to sort of keep eating the same amount so I don't lose weight, but then the thing is now I'm just losing muscle and gaining fat. So how would is there any sort of eating tricks to?
Well, I am going to get a little bit more detail later about the tricks. And again, that comes with we've created an athlete plate, which kind of does a light activity versus moderate versus heavy. And yeah. So if your activity level is going down, usually we'd shift towards more of a moderate and light activity, which is more focused towards like fruits and vegetables, more vegetables and less starches and grains. And that has the availability of like how much energy or carbohydrates that you're using for your exercise.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Oh, and I guess like finding ways to get food for quarantine. So, getting your friend or getting your family to go get groceries for you. Maybe making reliance on grocery store deliveries or kind of making use of your HelloFresh or Good Foods. So then that way you can actually reduce the amount of times you're going out in public. And the last 2 points that we found that was important would be, yes, it doesn't prevent antioxidants and probiotics, but it's good for supporting immune health at the moment. So for antioxidants, we would like to promote eating things high in antioxidants, such as fruit, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. And eating your antioxidants are actually going to reduce some of the effects that stress is going to have on your body. And lastly, we also want to promote high in probiotics, so your gut health and immunity. Bacteria promotes a lot of good like vitamin and minerals, and again, overall health. And there's some very interesting things with that in mind, but keep those in mind. Angela, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Nope. Yeah, just thanks. I'm not sure if your slides are advancing or if it's just my technology there. Okay. Just back to the supplements. So just one point, because I've been getting that question a lot in terms of dietary supplements versus ergogenic supplements. So I think you need to chat with your sport dietitian if you're working with one to make sure whether it makes sense based on your training to continue that ergogenic supplement versus your dietary supplement. So if anyone doesn't know what the difference is, we mean vitamin D, iron, calcium, things like that. That would be more nutrition supplement or dietary supplements versus creatine, whatever. Or even protein powders. So I think they're two very different things. And when I think Morgan was mentioning continue with your supplementation, that can be a big kettle of fish. So definitely your dietary supplements, because if you were in a normal schedule before and you find that schedule is a little bit changed now based on training, sometimes we forget to take the iron or forget to take the vitamin D, or we don't think we need it. So I think that's what you were referring to there in terms of making sure you keep taking that. Ergogenic supplements, but different kettle of fish.
Thanks.
Morgan, it's Erin. Yeah, no, I was just going to add to your comment about finding ways to get food during quarantine. If you're in Halifax, and I'm sure it's the case across the country as well, but if you are ordering food online, you should get into a routine of doing it. So right now, pickups are 4 to 5 days before you can even pick up your food that you ordered online. So if it's something you're interested in, which I actually think it's a really great idea, because you're just limiting your exposure in busy areas. So yeah, just get on a routine. So when you pick up your groceries, just, you don't have to buy bulk, but get ready to maybe prepare your next list so that it's on a rotation of every 5 days. And then you don't get stuck out sitting there being like, oh, I really wish I had ordered that. So I think that's pretty important to remember if you're doing online groceries.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Erin. So I guess moving on to kind of that question you had earlier about how do I adjust with training. So some of the training loads are going to be quite variable between the athletes. Mostly it has, again, accessibility to gym. What do they have in their home for working out? So at the moment, a lot of athletes are probably not going to be around heavy training load. Some might, depending on, again, what they have, but most athletes right now are probably going to fall between a moderate and light training. So this is actually going to influence of what kind of plate we have. So I think Angela developed these beautiful plates, which kind of gives you a guidance of performance and what you should eat based off of what kind of training you have. Again, so some of these athletes are probably going to be around the light training. So again, focusing more on your fruits and vegetables, less starches, and a little bit more protein, I would say. And in the plates right now, it says about 1/4 of a plate, but I would bump it up a little bit more than usual. Is there anything else you would like to add, Angela?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I know some athletes are telling me they're actually, even though their training may be different, that they might be even doing a little more cardio than they're used to, just because they're getting out and walking and they might not have actual, I'm just looking at your comment, Jer. Can you zoom into each? I think that was cut and pasted from another slide, but I have them in individual somewhere in my files, so I can send them out. They're actual just individual plate PDFs, to be a bit bigger and easier to read. So good point. Yeah, so some of them may actually fall, they might think they're in a lighter training, but they actually require a little bit more carbohydrate because they're running every day instead of other forms of training that they were more used to doing before that might require less carbohydrate or glycogen demand. So I think it really depends on what they're actually doing, and it's kind of, 3 buckets we kind of put it in terms of light, moderate, and heavy. So yeah, just take a look overall at what you're doing, the types of activity you're doing. If it is a little more aerobic, a little bit more endurance focused, then you may actually fall in that moderate category.
Yeah, thank you. So other things that we actually put this all in a document as well. So we decided to kind of give a list of shelf-stable foods, but at the moment, some of the benefits, a lot of dietitians have been recommending of going for those shelf-stable foods, mostly because they last longer, they don't spoil as quickly, and they're fairly cheap. Again, so like if you're self-isolating, or if you want to reduce the need to actually go outside and get food, going for your shelf-stable foods is actually a better option to go for. mostly because if you're trying to reduce your risk for getting COVID, staying at home is actually the best policy at the moment, and washing your hands and hand hygiene as well. But to keep in mind though, if you are buying some canned foods, they are usually high in sodium and sugar preserves. And again, that's just to preserve the food. This can actually be kind of reduced, especially with beans, if you're rinsing them for a couple of seconds. And also for the fruits and vegetables, if you're buying canned fruits and vegetables, choose the water packed rather than the sugar syrup kinds that are actually on the shelves.
There was actually none on the shelf yesterday when I went.
Probably fluctuations. And Erin put together, I think, this lovely list of different non-perishable foods that you could choose from, and also some of the reasons and what they're good sources of. Again, like some of the cereals, try to go for your high protein cereals, such like your Kashi or your Vector cereals would be better choices. And again, they'll give you that fiber, that filling up, and also give you extra protein as well. So you can actually take a look through some of these. I won't go through each certain food, but it's just for you to kind of look at. But some of the athletes are like, hey, that's great, but some of these are not on my shelf. So what do I do actually if I don't have these foods? So Melissa and I created a quick little flowchart web in which you could actually go through. So you could start with one food and say, okay, well, I'd like to prefer this, but what happens if I don't have this? So for instance, if you're starting with like a chicken, what do you do if you don't have your chicken? Well, maybe I'll go for my roast chicken. Okay, well, maybe that's not around or everyone's taken that up. And you could go for your canned beans. Well, there's no canned beans. Well, what's the last thing I could do is probably dried beans, and at least those you're getting good quality proteins. And then there's other little variables that we put through as well. So certain foods that you could actually like transfer. So for instance, like milk, if you have milk at home, then you could actually make your own yogurt. So you could actually keep doing that. It's fairly cheap. And I know Angela's done an Instapot recipe for yogurt actually, which should be up on coaches.ca soon at some point, I believe. So
End of the week. Yeah.
End of the week. Great. Near the end of the document that we kind of pulled together were just some extra little resources that we thought were good. Again, bringing down like, oh, I've only dried beans. Like, what do I do? Well, there's actually some great resources on pulsescanada.ca. So they actually can tell you how you soak your beans. They actually have multiple different recipes that you can do. Lentils.org is also great, especially for different recipes about lentils. On top of that, we also have there's a Super Cook app. So like if you're actually stuck with certain foods, you can actually enter in what food you have and it'll actually spit out a recipe that you could have based off of what you have in your house. Not only that, but we also have a mindful eating app, like if I'm hungry, that way you can sort of track of like, am I eating because I'm bored or am I eating because I'm hungry? And lastly, we kind of threw in there mostly because when we've been seeing a lot of pasta's been coming off the shelves, and there's just a quick little homemade pasta recipe in which you could actually make for yourself to keep fresh. So these are just some of the references that we have. And I'm going to open up the floor to questions now, which I think there are some. I think there's also, we have some extra resources to some infographics. Let's see if I can.
I'll just start some conversation maybe while you're looking, Morgan. Just curious how many coaches out there have had other resources sent their way through their sport, through friends, through, because there seems to be quite a bit coming through my inbox and Twitter and other social media outlets, that it's getting a little overwhelming right now. At first, last week we thought we were the big gurus of nutrition and trying to put something out, but now there's probably a dozen or more related to sport and athletes. Just curious, anybody curious as to what's credible and what's not? I'm gonna take that as a big no. So this will be your first. So Morgan's gonna show you a couple really great ones that we've shared with a few of our sports. So just again, looking at quality protein, amount of protein, because that's some of the questions I've been getting in terms of just overall, how do we adjust our intake as athletes right now? Again, just seeing the different athletes and the different training environments that they've created in their basements or hallways, and the intensity of what they're doing is really just going to dictate what that intake looks like. So it's hard for us to say, take out a 500 calories and what that would look like. Initially, we kind of thought that was a great way of kind of suggesting, but really now finding out that, athletes are very creative in how they can train. And I know Jer's on the call, and a lot of our S&C coaches have been great at developing some at-home training programs. So it's not to say they're not doing anything. They definitely are. However, some athletes may be instructed just to, hey, take a break, regain especially if you've just come out of an intense training camp, which I know some of the athletes I work with have. So, taking that break then would definitely dictate, an adjustment or a decrease in their overall calories. What we really don't want to happen is something that I'm sure there's another coaches session coming up on in terms of relative energy deficiency. So if they are training and think they're not actually doing an intense workout or training load, and in fact they are, and then under eating can actually suppress a lot of the hormones in terms of that satiety cues, fullness cues, and hunger cues, and have other health repercussions as well. And that can happen within 2 weeks of a deficit being unavailable energy to support that training. So we don't want to put out those blanket statements of, just slash your calories and your intake back. And meanwhile, we've got athletes doing all kinds of stuff, going for 10K runs every day. And, we didn't know. So really be cautious around those sort of just decrease your overall calories. So, and I think it comes down to, again, and we've got some good mindful apps out there from our mental performance folks, but also just mindful in terms of what we're eating and how we're eating. And I know I've heard the term virus chips, like isolation chips, like storm chips. So we're definitely not a storm day. It's going to be multiple days. So yes, enjoy those comforts of home and social eating, which we've actually gotten away from because we've been so busy, and now we're forced to be, not forced to be with our family, but we kind of are, you can enjoy that time eating together and scheduling those meal times now as family. Maybe it becomes a little bit more intuitive, that where athletes might not have been able to have that opportunity to eat more intuitively. So there could be some, I always look at the silver linings of any situation. Coming out with some new recipes you can try that you've always wanted to try. I keep seeing that on Facebook feeds and Twitter that, athletes are finally getting to try that recipe they've always wanted to. I will refer you back again, as Morgan did, to coach.ca. Coach's Kitchen has some great recipe videos. There's 26 on there now, and there's going to be another 18 posted by the end of the month. So really encourage athletes to try some of those out and pick one or two, a week that they can get each of the family members to kind of try to make. So I will shut up now. Morgan, did you find your...
I did find the other infographics. So some of the other resources that we found was kind of how to preserve your muscle mass, which kind of gives some little quick tips for some of the athletes of like exercise. We're more important as nutrition, we're kind of more concerned with the high quality protein, consider like eating some extra protein. There was also a second resource that we had as well for immunity. It kind of just restates of kind of our important parts that we kind of discussed earlier, saying sticking to a regular schedule, staying hydrated, eating antioxidants. We didn't really get much into vitamin D, but and as well as your probiotics and prebiotics. Yeah. Okay. I think
Christy, is there a space where we can maybe drop some resources for the coaches?
For sure. So when this ends, I'm going to be posting it on YouTube. So in the description box, I'll just, I wrote down a couple of things that you mentioned, like the Coach's Kitchen, grocery deliveries, good food, Hello Fresh, things like that. I'll link it in the description box. And then if there's any other things that you want to include in that, I can add to that as well.
Excellent.
Are there any other questions for the dietitians?
Hi, this is Anna. Thank you very much for this great information. I'm working with University women's basketball team, and just wanted to know about the colorful slides you have here, the plates. I'm going to be hosting a Zoom team meeting, a virtual team meeting with my team this weekend, and I'd love to include some of those colorful slides and the athletes' plates that you have, the various levels. Just wondering, how would I get those documents, or is it possible?
Yeah, I have them somewhere in my gazillion files. And like I said, they're just a PDF version of each of those plates. And
right.
I will do my best to find them tonight, and I will post them, or I'll send them to Christine. We can post them.
Oh, sorry, where would they be posted?
So I just put my email in the group chat box, so comcoach@cscatlantic.ca. Just if you're interested in those resources, just send me a quick email and I'll connect with Angela and get those to you for sure.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. All right, are there any other questions?
Hi, my name's Emily, and I'm a student in university at the moment. I was wondering if you had any tips and tricks for the transition back from the university life living in meal hall and dorm, and then switching back to the family life living in home or house.
Do you want me to take that on, Morgan? Oh, meal hall. Yeah. That's a whole other session. Adjustments, do you mean in terms of just sort of the ways of eating, or quantity, quality, or all the above?
Pretty much all of the above at this point.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, the most difficult or challenging part of living in residence and having meal plans are, technically they can find pretty good choices most times in meal hall. What I find is usually lacking is the in-between. So the snack, quality snacks, pre-post training. If meal times are only between, 11 and 2, and they don't get back to meal hall until 2. there's nothing left, that kind of thing. So it's about planning again. So usually I work with athletes to just tell them what, again, those shelf stable items that sort of Morgan went through are applicable in terms of going back to residents and having some staples in their room if they can, if they have a little fridge, things like that. I know one thing that wasn't on the list was, jerky. Usually those are very shelf stable, and they are on the shelf right now. And they're quality proteins that they can kind of keep for in between meals. If they have access to a kitchen. I know some of the residences or some of the dining halls now have what they call my pantry section, and they can actually go and prepare foods. Some of them will even let them take them out. So if they can go and prepare, some energy balls or different high protein muffins and things like that, again, that they can keep, it just becomes a little bit more of a planning thing than anything. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a switch. You're right. Mom's home cooking versus I'm back in meal hall and have access. And sometimes it's even overwhelming because now they have access to multiple foods, multiple portions, that kind of thing. So again, it's being able to manage that plate as best they can based on their current training volume.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any last questions? All right, well, thank you so much, Morgan and Angela and Melissa and Erin for giving us this advice about nutrition, especially during this tough time of isolation. I know it will be beneficial for these coaches to provide these resources to their athletes, but also I think coaches, you can use this type of information for yourself as well. We started these sessions with the idea of connecting coaches, and hopefully these topics have all been helpful and applicable during these times of uncertainty. But if you do have any other ideas or suggestions for future topics, please feel free to email me. Like I said, I put my email in the chat box, so please reach out with any questions, comments, any ideas for future topics. We would really appreciate it. But thank you so much for tuning in, and early next week we'll be posting a schedule for next week's session, so we hope to see you then. And thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.